Speaking of which, Beijing is hosting a very important visitor as we speak, US Secretary of State Antony Blinken. It was a long overdue trip. The last US Secretary to visit China was Mike Pompeo. That was in 2018, so it's been 5 years. Blinken was supposed to visit in February, but that trip was postponed by the balloon saga. You may remember that story. We reported it. Chinese spy balloons were spotted over American skies. Washington shot down one of them and postponed the trip. Anyway, it's finally happening. Blinken had 3 important meetings in Beijing with President Xi Jinping, with Foreign Minister Qin Gang, and with top diplomat Wang Yi. How did the meetings go? Well, here's what President Xi Jinping said after meeting Antony Blinken.
The two sides have also made progress and reached agreement on some specific issues. This is very good.
So some progress and some agreement. I guess that was expected. You see, China-US ties have hit rock bottom. So the expectations from this visit were pretty low. Blinken's mission was to keep the lines of communication open to avoid any miscalculations. But for China, the big issue was Taiwan. President Xi told Antony Blinken that relationships should be based on mutual respect and sincerity. A bit rich coming from the expansionist in chief. Either way, the visit seems to have gone by without much fuss. Way better than the shouting contest in Alaska 2 years back. But let's come back to Washington. China will be a key issue when Biden and Modi talk. The US may not say it out loud, but they're locked in a Cold War with Beijing. The White House has a 2-part strategy. One is economic warfare, all the sanctions, the tariffs, the export controls. The idea is to weaken the Chinese economically, to take factories and jobs out of China. The second strategy is military deterrence. We've seen more US activity in the Indo-Pacific. Biden has also deployed more warships and submarines in the region, so the message is quite clear. The Indo-Pacific will not be a Chinese lake. Where does India figure in that plan? New Delhi is key to both these strategies, economic and military. Again, I come back to the question, will Prime Minister Modi agree to what Biden has in mind? Well, unlike the US, India shares a border with China, a long, contested and volatile border. The two armies faced off in the year 2020 in Galwan, and since then there's been a standoff. 38 months and no sign of de-escalation. We've been locked in a standoff with the Chinese for 38 months. Thousands of soldiers have been deployed on either side. Even a small miscalculation can be deadly. And Prime Minister Modi cannot ignore this border issue. He cannot push China beyond a point. The US, on the other hand, faces no such restrictions. They're sitting safe, thousands of miles away. We've seen this contrasting approach in the Quad as well. India has been reluctant to give the Quad a military color. Yes, there are joint exercises, but at its heart, the Quad is non-military. And don't get me wrong, India very much sees China as a growing threat. The only difference is in the approach. Will Joe Biden understand that? As things stand today, he may not really have a choice. At this stage, Biden cannot afford to antagonize India. So his only option is to play along. Having said that, he will be expecting something positive. In fact, let me walk you through some recent events. South Korea's president visited Washington in the month of April. And then last week, a US nuclear submarine docked in Korea. The Filipino president was also here in the US. He then granted the Americans access to multiple military bases. Last month, Antony Blinken traveled to Papua New Guinea. Biden was supposed to go, but he pulled out at the last moment, so Blinken went. Either way, the Americans got something out of Papua New Guinea. Unimpeded access to bases in Papua New Guinea. Now, do you see the trend here? The US has been busy in the Indo-Pacific. They've gotten what they wanted from these countries, from South Korea, from the Philippines, from Papua New Guinea. So will India be next? Well, Biden is certainly dangling the carrot. We mentioned the jet engines and the drones. That's part of a large US project to pump money and to pump technology into India. But what does America want in return? Probably a second front in the conflict against China. It's purely a self-serving policy. And how should India respond? Well, with some self-service of its own. Challenging China militarily does not make sense at this point. Neither does joining the US camp. Prime Minister Modi has repeatedly emphasized on strategic autonomy, on a multipolar world. He wants to challenge China, but on his own terms. So it's up to Biden to dehyphenate things, to see India as a partner, not a pawn.